In today's video, you're gonna watch me start up 5 brand new nutrition clients. Here we go. Okay, so for my first client here, I got a female, 34, 5'5", just right around 72 kilos or 158 pounds. And she wants to lose 10 pounds. So I got her tracking for 3 days, and there's more data here. There ended up being 7 days for me to base off my initial recommendations on. Usually when I'm starting out a client, I don't want to just run the stats based on, their age, height, activity levels, those type of things to start my initial plan off that, to start tracking, monitoring things so I can base some suggestions based on what they're currently doing, not just what would be optimal. And that's going to allow me to split the distance and get them to, number one, get better results at the beginning and make it easier to follow. So I take a look at things here in terms of what she's doing. If you've never seen the LogEat software that I'm using here, this is a tracking software on the client side of things, as well as a coaching software. So it's convenient to be able to look at the daily log as well as the food levels. So when I take a look at the last 2 weeks here and take a look at the averages, she's averaging 1,800 calories. It looks like there's a trend that her weight's coming down. Maybe a little too early to say for sure because it did come up at the beginning. If she's in a true deficit already, but if I was a betting coach, I would say that she is. Fat on average around 70 grams. We got total carbohydrates over the course of the week, 165 or 164 grams, and then protein at 136. So if she wants to lose weight, and we think about her calories for a second there, let's just call it 1,800. 1,800 divided by 72 kilos puts me at 25 kcals per kilogram, which is under maintenance. And chances are she'd be in a deficit if she stayed here. And protein wise, she's in a good spot as well. I think the biggest thing being staying at these levels, and maybe even staying at these levels, or if anything, maybe lowering them a little bit, is gonna take just bringing her fat down a touch. So in terms of setting a plan and some targets, right off the beginning, I'm gonna set her at 1,750-ish calories per day. That's gonna have her losing weight at just under a pound a week theoretically. And then for levels of food, if we set her at 135 grams of carbs, 135 grams of protein, 170 grams of carbs, 60 grams of fat, that puts her right within the optimal ranges. And with fat as well, if we take, 60 grams divided by 72, she's at 0.8 grams of fat per kilogram, so right within the optimal ranges of 0.5 to 1.5. Everything's right within there while being in a deficit, and I am sure that she's gonna lose some weight here. That's where I would start her off. I think the biggest thing being starting her off at these levels, getting her to track to those daily targets, and then I had just mentioned with her, in terms of the action steps, just looking at places where we can probably reduce some fat. Maybe there's a few days where there's multiple protein bars, a few days where there's fat sources in terms of mayo, margarine, maybe just trying to monitor those or reduce the serving sizes while keeping the volume high is gonna allow her to hit these targets, stay full, and see some results. So that would be kind of where I would start things off with this first fat loss focused client. All right, so the next client I have lined up here is a male, 42 years old, right at around 75 kilos or 165 pounds, and has the main goal of trying to gain some muscle. And he's mentioned in the past that, I don't know, it's not sure if he's consistency, but he seems to just plateau and can't get past this point. So it sounds like we need more food, but I've got him tracking 3 to 5 days. This client, Andy, by the way, I'll give him a shout out here. Andy, go check out his Instagram page because I know he's just launching a brand new training and nutrition coaching business. So go give him a follow and check out what he's, there's a little shout out for you, Andy. But let's take a look at his current nutrition, which is pretty spot on because I know he's trying to grow this business and walk the walk. Things look good overall. So we had 5 days worth of nutritional information. If we take a look at the averages here over those 5 days, he's gonna be at right around 2,600 calories. So based on his body weight, 2,600 divided by 75 kilos, 34 kcals per kilogram of body weight. He's at a higher end range of maintenance, which is usually 30 to 35 kcals per kilogram. So if he ate this way, chances are, depending on his activity levels, he wouldn't be able to move past that. So he's probably gonna need more food. Where's that food gonna come from? Daily fat was at 88 88 grams per day. Carbohydrates was at 280 grams per day, and protein was at 190 grams. Some days quite a bit higher than that though. You had one low day at 123, but 228, 200, 213. For someone looking to eat more food and gain more muscle, obviously protein is important, but there's a threshold there. It can be one of those things where if you eat more protein, it can be hard to eat enough total calories coming from carbohydrates and fat to gain muscle. So this is one of the things we're going to be mindful of, is not too much protein, as well as bringing his calories up. So I set some initial food targets for him, closer to 3,100 calories, fat coming up at 100 grams, carbohydrates at 350 grams, and protein at 190. So keeping the protein the same, but not increasing it proportionally so that he has to eat quite a bit more protein, because that can be limiting. Again, it can kind of limit the total amount of food that you're going to be eating. So some food choices for him, and I took a look at his food log, but usually, if you've been in the health space for long enough, you're focusing on low calorie, high volume food choices that don't go very far with your calories. So him starting to work on some less traditional diet friendly food choices, juices, dried fruit, maybe trail mix, things that will have a lot of calories and not a lot of food density, are going to be smart for him to work in and try to include as he works up to these food levels. But that's where I would start Andy. Good luck with the nutrition plan here, Andy, and good luck with the coaching program as well. All right, so the next client we have here is a 25-year-old weight loss focused client who wants to lose 10 pounds of fat, but also kind of body comp related to would like to gain some muscle. So we're gonna blend those goals together and focus on weight loss, but maybe a touch slower, and make sure the protein is where it needs to be. And she's doing some training. 5'9", 148 pounds at the beginning, but we had realized that was an estimate, and when she started tracking, she was closer to 143, 144 when she started, which is very uncommon actually. Most people don't overestimate their weight, they tend to underestimate, especially if their goal is weight loss focused. But taking a look at things here, we got 5 days worth of tracking. She's at 1,900 calories on average at the beginning here. If I take that 1,900 divided by 64, she's below maintenance, 29 kcals per kilogram, which she is already losing weight. So we kind of we see that trend already. So from a starting place, I'm not going to change all that much. This is the importance of getting to what they're actually doing to begin with, not just the theoretical stuff. You can do the theoretical stuff, but it can also come back to bite you if people are doing some underreporting and what they're currently doing is so far away from the optimal levels that there's too much of a gap. So always get a sense of what they're doing first as well. Total fat at 61 grams per day. Got carbohydrates at 225 and protein at 120. In terms of starting place, protein is going to be important for her, and she's definitely is showing that some days she can get up to a 140. So we're going to bump that up a little bit. And in terms of if we bring that up, where are we going to take from? I'll have to bring her carbohydrates down to around 210 to make the numbers work. So we're going to start it off at 130 grams of protein, 210 grams of carbs, 60 grams of fat. And then if I take a look at where will that come from, we're gonna have to bring some carbohydrates down. So there's rice at multiple meals, which isn't a bad thing at all, but maybe just trying to include it closer to training, or that training meal, that type of thing could be an easy place to reduce, as well as okay, got some cooked white rice, cheese, ground beef, can we add some vegetables in, take away some of the rice just to make the carbs go further, keep her full, and kind of go from there. Would be some of the suggestions that I made right off the bat to make the numbers a little bit easier to work with. Another thing, a day like this day on Thursday, 210 grams of carbs. So what did that day look like, right? Why was it successful is the biggest thing. So we're starting to take a look at those things, because there's definitely carbs in every meal, and it's pretty balanced. There you go. Yeah, so this was 170 grams of carbs. This day was 214, so it's closer. So maybe you can do similar things that way, and make some of those food choices to make all the numbers work. It's just taking a look at what are some of the bigger sources that that are contributing? Can we manage those? Can we swap them out and kind of go from there? But that's where we'll start off a client like this to get some weight loss going while making sure it's like slow and steady, and she's in a position to retain her muscle and maybe even put it on if she, pushes the training pretty hard. Those are my thoughts on this one. All right, so we got another client here. This is a client that wants to lose 5 pounds and keep it off in a healthy and sustainable way. She's around 5'7", 142 pounds or 65 kilos, roughly 28 years old, and had mentioned too that she does feel sensitive to carbs. Like things she had mentioned, she seems to have issues when she goes over 125 grams per day. So I'd love to know a little bit more about like what those issues are, but I think we'll explore them through time, but also take her word for it as we go here. So in terms of the 3 days worth of tracking, it is generally better to you want to find the resistance between getting someone tracking and getting at least 3 days. Ideally, you have probably like 5 days with a weekend day, but that doesn't always happen. But 3 days is enough for me to start basing some recommendations. She had mentioned too that this Saturday day was an atypical day for her. She did some eating out and had like a big chicken sandwich with like a lemonade kind of thing, like at a barbecue or something along those lines. So she had made reference of that. Those days happen. I think a lot of times they are outliers, but they probably happen enough to people that, number one, kudos to her for like actually tracking it and including it, but they probably happen more often than we think in terms of when we're not being mindful of what we're eating, which is why the importance of having a coach and a second set of eyes and finding some balance between those things. That's what allows this process to be sustainable. So I'm glad this data point is here because we can take a look at it, and then from there, average calories are closer to 1,900 calories, 98 grams of fat per day on average. And she had mentioned that she's sensitive to carbs, so this is higher to begin with than I typically would set. But I'm just putting together different pieces of the puzzle. On average, 135 grams of carbs, and then protein was at, on average, just scrolling down here, 122 grams per day. One day at 104, one day at 143, one day at 120. So if the goal is to lose weight, protein's not in a bad place, but it'll probably need to be more consistent. And for someone like this, when they had mentioned that they're sensitive to carbs, I'm not the coach that's gonna be like, that's not true, let's change something, do something different, like that kind of thing. Let's set a realistic carb target to begin with and see how things go, and see if through time we can add some of those carbs in. That'll be the best way to build rapport, see what's what, and go from there. Especially as she gets leaner, maybe we can bring them up. We're gonna start with protein at 110 grams, carbs at 100 grams per day, and total fat at 75 grams. I don't perceive this to be an issue for her or what she'll do, or those type of things, like in terms of how she'll adjust for that. Just got to be more mindful of things. She's eating quite a bit of ground beef, which makes sense from a need enough fat perspective. Let's take a look at Saturday. This was the over day, but then the lower day was on Thursday, and the protein was lower as well. That's probably the most I would say probably typical day for her. So I'm just taking a look at why does it look the way it does, and can we make any recommendations for this client? It's just gonna be some starting point, get some consistency, how things go, how things look, and adjust from there. All right, got one more client on the list here. We got a 49-year-old female, 5'2", 116 pounds, or right around 52.5 kilos there. Main goal is I don't have much weight to lose, but maybe 5 pounds, but I always want to have a bit more visible definition in my muscles and improve energy. An improvement in energy is always welcome. Also, in terms of what do you think is holding you back from reaching these goals, I'm pretty consistent with my nutrition, which this does look really good and balanced and complete. But my snacking at night is my downfall, maybe a bit low in protein. I have a feeling if this client can be consistent here, and we can shift some of those snacking calories to more food through the day and bulk that up, it's gonna be more consistent for longer. I have a feeling based on this, which all looks really, really good, average 1,600 calories, and if you do that at 1,600 divided by 52 on average, we're right at the lower end of maintenance. So chances are, like based on her goals, like eating this way should help her get a little bit leaner, which will help the, you know, visible muscles and the energy levels. Like we don't go too far down and push the leanness, because that wouldn't be helpful. But we're just gotta be mindful of this kind of stuff and maybe bring the protein up a touch. On average, it was at just under 110 grams, which isn't bad per se, but it could probably be a little bit higher. So in terms of targets, where to start her off at, right around 1,500 calories, 110 grams of protein each and every day, 150 grams of carbs and 50 grams of fat. No huge deviations. If we take a look at our food log and thinking about, okay, well, what needs to change? I think just moving away from some of the higher calorie snack choices to more food overall, or like, as you can see, there's like tons of like high quality balanced meals and food choices. Like nothing needs to change. We just need to like continue on eating this way and maybe prevent some of those like maybe overeating like snack sessions that could happen that maybe we didn't capture here. That'll be it's like doing this stuff long enough to see the benefits is the toughest part. This day, 1,800 calories, maybe some takeout, which I mean is expected, that type of stuff. And maybe on a day there's takeout, maybe there's like less, maybe not some candy, that type of stuff. Like those are like, I think when you're being more mindful of it and have a food target to shoot for, those are the checks and balances that make sense. So for this client specifically, it's just gonna be like setting some realistic numbers, being consistent, and continue to make the most of the food choices so that you can do it long enough to continue to see progress. I think the consistency piece is huge, and that just comes with more time and being smart about the entire process. And that's it, folks. That's me starting up 5 brand new nutrition clients. If you enjoyed this video, you're probably curious about what happens next, what happens at their check-ins. You're gonna learn all about that process and how to do a check-in in the video I've linked up right here. So check it out now, and I'll see you in the next video.